Arguably the most successful of all German seaplanes, and perhaps of all the seaplanes used in the Second World War, was the Heinkel He-115. This truly superb design often operated from specifically built flying boat stations, bases at which maritime aircraft could be serviced to any level of refurbishment required. The bases provided large gantries that could carry seaplanes far out into the water before releasing them, thus avoiding the alternative process of launching them from the ground, a time-consuming process that occupied many people and had its risks. You can tell from these installations just how committed the Wehrmacht was to the seaplane and flying boat programs. The commitment went further than just installations. It was also recognized how different the demands would be on maritime aircrew. Therefore, the crew selection process was more stringent and demanding than that for land-based aircraft crews. All of this effort was expended on the premise that seaplane crews had to be competent with nautical topics, every bit as much as those of an aviation nature. They were required to be masters of the oldest and at the same time the newest disciplines. This is a new class of crew members being made familiar with the He-115s as they're serviced in their workshop. The builders of these aircraft also needed to be skilled in the crafts of the sea and air, and the craftsmanship of these planes throughout the war was always of a very high standard. If you look carefully at the man on the right, you can see his foot on the special platform incorporated into the plane's wing. Something that would be vital if the aircraft were being serviced at sea and yet never considered on a normal land-based aircraft. There were many other differences between seaplanes and land planes, which put added stress on those that serviced and flew them. Everything had to be compact and neat because of the very limited amount of space available, and what there was had to be well utilized. There are parallels between the life of the crew members on the long-range seaplane like the Heinkel He-115, which performed its task, flying above the sea, and the lifestyle of submariners who spent so much of their time beneath it. Both crews would have worked in confined, uncomfortable conditions, with the constant threat of detection by the enemy. The limited space available in a seaplane dictated that all the equipment taken on board be selected frugally. But the hybrid maritime nature of the seaplane insisted that items like a megaphone to communicate with a boat party or a boat hook for holding dinghies alongside were always readily accessible. They were items that you would certainly never see on a land-based aircraft. For equipment not needed in flight, there were storage holds provided at the root of each wing. Here would be stored maritime necessities like lines, ropes, cable. More like a bosun's locker than part of a high-speed patrol bomber. In fact, these Luftwaffe crews were considered a breed of their own, having to deal with the new technology of aviation and the old demands of the sea. These men are stowing survival rations, brandy, chocolate, and medical needs in a sealed compartment inside one of the seaplane's floats. In the event of a crash, the watertight floats are likely to survive, and to a crew in the water, the precious contents would be lifesavers. Intelligent thinking by designers who understood the cruel sea. Although the 115 saw service throughout the war, its origins go back to 1936, when it competed with a Blum and Voss design to provide the Luftwaffe with its first major single-wing seaplane. Heinkel demonstrated that its design was much more advanced than anything else available. In fact, it captured just about every major seaplane record in the world at the time. So conclusive was the 115's performance that the Luftwaffe had little choice but to accept it as the standard. The decision was vindicated by the crew's appreciation of an aircraft that responded so well, particularly in the difficult weather conditions seaplanes were often required to operate in. Not all German flying boat shore facilities had large gantries that simply plucked the plane out of the water and positioned it back there as required. Another method of launching beached seaplanes was simply to slide them down a concrete ramp that descended into the water. A simple but effective process which allowed the plane to be operational in a fairly short period of time. Important, given that both rescue and attack missions often came with so little notice. One of the main missions of the 115 was mine laying, often flying just outside enemy ports and along frequently used shipping lanes. There they'd make their drops, working under the protection of night. The precautions the Allies took to avoid mine damage tied up thousands of man-hours, resources, and much of the home fleet. From the German point of view, it was a very economical form of warfare, particularly against Britain, totally dependent as she was upon naval supplies for survival. Perhaps the greatest recognition of the success of the 115 can be gauged from these facts. In 1942, with almost 500 aircraft produced, the production line was run down to concentrate on other aircraft. But in late 1943, at a time when the German war effort required every fighter to be had, the 115 came back to the production line, because the need for continued supply of this 1936 design proved insatiable.